What's up, Titans? Steve here from GamerTitan.com, and today we're going to have a video on triggers. So, you may be new to the core editor, and you might be wondering, what are triggers and how can I use them? So, triggers are gameplay objects. They're found here in the core content under gameplay objects. You can add them to your game like anything, either by clicking and dragging here, or by adding it to your hierarchy. So, what do triggers do? Triggers are used to connect events. So if I look at this trigger here, I can modify the properties of it by moving it, setting its position, its rotation, and its scale. The collision on a trigger, even if the collision is on, you can see that we can walk through the trigger. And that is just saying that when you walk into the trigger, that it will sense that you're walking into it. Lifespan is time in seconds until it will be destroyed. So if you want a trigger to only be interactable at the start of your game, you might add like a 30-second timer or something like that, and then after 30 seconds you will no longer be able to interact with that game, or that trigger, sorry. The shape affects the shape, of course. You got box, sphere, and lastly, capsule. Then you have whether the sphere is interactable or not. So the trigger is interactable. So when a trigger is interactable, you can walk up to it and it'll say press F to interact, basically. Then you can add an interaction label. So I could make that move object. And every time I walk up to this, I will see a command prompt that says F move object. See? Whereas if this is non-interactable, I will not see that F, and if I did not have anything in here, it won't say move object. There's other ways you can use interaction labels through coding, and I'll show you a little bit of that here too. So one thing I want to mention is that all of the maps, you could call them, that we're using are going to be available on our website. So if you wanted to, you could download this map, go through all the code with me, and you could see exactly what I'm talking about, and you could edit it yourself to play around with it and see how it works for you. Also, you could copy our scripts and use them in a different file that you want to use, right? So if you're trying to do something that I've done here, you can copy the script, use it in your own project. So let's just start by taking a look at what are some things you can do with triggers. Right here, you can open a door. You can close a door. Over here you can pick up guns with triggers. Pick up a knife, pick up a rocket launcher. So you can do all sorts of things with triggers. You can also add equipment that gets picked up by triggers, and equipment can have abilities. So these guns that I had were just from the game objects, from the core content, so these all come with your game. So even if you don't know how to code or script, you don't have to, because core has already done it for you. It'll pick up the gun when you press F. But we're going to go into a little bit of making games and stuff, so we're going to teach you how you can change it and how you can make your own. So if I walk up, one of these skulls is interactable, which of course you can push F to equip this equipment, and this will allow me to roll when I have this equipped. Then I made another skull, same thing, it'll allow me to roll, but this is not an interactable object. So when I say not an interactable object, that means as soon as I run into this object, it's going to equip it. So I run into it, now I have it equipped, now I can roll using the shift binding, and that is written in the equipment code. And we're going to have a whole video on weapons and equipment later, so if you're interested in those, please go check those out. But I'm going to continue going with triggers today, because that's what we're talking about. So let's take a look at this. So another way to interact with the trigger is by going into the trigger zone, and another option is leaving the trigger zone. So when I enter the trigger zone for this cube, this left cube, you'll see it starts spinning. Also, I have an interactable label on it. But when I leave this, it stops spinning. Spinning, stop spinning. And I press F on it, move up, and it says moving up on the left hand side. Then I have this other box here. It stops moving when I enter the interactable trigger, and it starts moving again when I leave. So let's go through some of this stuff. We're going to start with the door. So if I look here to room 1, white box door, let's bring ourselves over there. So there's our door, of course, and we have our knob, I'm calling it, which is our trigger, and then we have our door itself. Or sorry, this is our script. The door itself is right here. So if I go to the script, we can look through this. So in the beginning of our scripts, and we're going to have scripting videos as well. If you don't understand these scripts, I don't blame you. They're a little bit confusing at first, but as you start using them, you'll get a lot more comfortable with them. So how did I derive this script right here? Well, one great way to create scripts is to open the script generator. Now that I have this open, we can go event trigger overlap, and this will help us start writing our script. So we have a couple options in here, and I copied this and I pasted it in. So this door is only interactable, which means that when I overlap the trigger, nothing happens, and when I leave the overlap of the trigger, nothing happens, which are these two functions right here and right here. And how you connect those functions to actually work is down here. End overlap event and begin overlap event. Then of course we have our third one, which is on interacted, and that is connected via this line of code right here. So this is saying that the trigger, which I'm referencing up here, when I interact with it, the interacted event, that comes from the Core's API found on their website, we're going to connect this function on interacted. So if I was to change this to move door, I would have to change this as well to move door. Oopsies, no capital on the D. Then this would know to call this function right here when it's interacted. The trigger is getting its name from here, so if I change this name to knob, then I would have to change it to knob down here as well in order for it to work. And an interactive event connect is the core API, so this is always going to stay the same, no matter what your trigger is called, no matter what your function is called. So you can copy this, create a new script, or you can look at my scripts in our online game files, and you can copy them from there and modify them to do what you'd like as well. So we're going to just go through this script real quick. The trigger, we're getting the custom property of the trigger. And how do you do that? Click on your script. Now if I want to add a custom property that's going to be this specific wall right here, I click and drag it here, and it adds it here. Then I can copy and paste it from here. Copy, paste. And so now, if I was ever to type prop white box wall 01 doorway 01 into my script, then it would reference this specific wall. So I'm just going to take that out. So that's how I got this trigger and this door 1. And then of course I can change this here anytime I want. Then I just have to change it here and here and here. Then I have my door 01 is getting the door itself. Door rotation is getting the original rotation of the door. And I'm doing that so that I can modify the rotation and I can set it back. And then I created a variable called door open, and it's false. So now we know that this is my trigger, and when I interact with it, it's going to connect the function called onInteracted, which happens to be this function right here. And these are the objects that it's going to be using. So from our function that we borrowed from our handy script generator, if other is a player, then UI print to screen, and I changed this a little bit so that it would say the trigger name, which I named knob in this case, turned by other name, which of course the other is a player, which is me. So then it's going to say knob turned by Stevel Knievel, and the color is going to be green. I could change this to blue, red, whatever I want to. And that's going to be in all capitals. Then you can look. If door open equals false, which I set up here to equal false. So if it does equal false, which it's starting to, then door rotation in the z-axis equals door rotation in the z-axis minus 90. So that would be the same as me clicking on this door and setting the rotation to minus 180 in this case, because the original rotation is minus 90, and you're subtracting another 90 from that. And we're going to have another video on rotating objects and moving objects, and we're going to go into detail about all the cool things you can do with rotations and movements. But for today, we're just focusing on triggers, and I'm just going to go through my script just a little bit so you can kind of understand it. So then door 01, which is, of course, our white box door itself, rotate to a new rotation, so rotation.new, and this is rotate to, rotation new, that's all core API, whereas the door is my object that I coded up here equals get the white box door. Then we're going to move it to door rotation, which of course got the rotation of the door here, and then it subtracted 90 degrees from it on the z-axis, and this is a time. So I could change this to 5 seconds if I wanted to. Then of course I could change this one to 5 seconds too to make it the same. Then it will take 5 seconds to move the door instead of 1. And then this line right here, door open equals not door open, what that's going to let me do is it's going to change this door open from false to true. And when it's true, then it's going to do the opposite of when it's false. So if it equals false, it's going to do this, or else if it's not false, it's going to do this, which is adding 90 degrees to the Z rotation, same as up here, but opposite. Then it's going to rotate the door to the new door rotation, and then it's going to switch it back to false, so that when I use the trigger again, it's going to do the original, which is going to open the door. Then this is how you can change your interaction labels within scripting. You want trigger, which is from here, which is getting this right here, dot interaction label. So this comes from their core API. You got to make sure that you spell it right. You have proper capitals and not capitals, like this I is lowercase, L capital. Equals, put in quotations whatever you want. So I could put open blue door, and here I could even put close red door. Now, if I save it, and trigger interact by connect on interacted, so that means when I interact with it, it's going to call this function. So if I save that and I close it, now when I hit play, at first it's going to say open door. And you might wonder, how come it's saying open door even though my code says open red door or open blue door? Well, that is because on my knob, I created an interaction label for it to start with. So how I could fix that is by going here, and I could set the original interaction label within my code like that, and save it, and then I could delete this right here. And then all of my interaction labels now are being done through my code. So now if I hit play, open blue door, and now it's taking 5 seconds instead of 1 second. And I can close it, open it, close it. And of course on the left hand side it's saying knob turned by Stevel Knievel. That was this line right here, UI.print to screen trigger name, which was the knob, turned by other name, my name. And just to show you that this works, if I change it to color.red, now I turn it and it says knob turned by Stevel Knievel. It's in red. Awesome. So we went through that. These were of course scripted by the Manticore employees, and these are awesome. If you don't want to go into scripting, you can just add them to your game here. For example, if I just search gun, that's exactly what this is. Just plug and play. You don't have to do any scripting. It's all done for you. I hit play, walk over, open the door. Oh, it's a little slow to open now. I go over, equip advanced shotgun. I can equip it. Works right out of the box. Nothing to worry about. But now we can go to our skulls, and the skulls are equipment, which we will show you in another video. But basically, they have pickup triggers, interactable, you can change the shape, and then equipment, when you add a pickup trigger to it, the pickup trigger is always going to equip the equipment, which happens to be the skull. So in this case, I got the skull, and I added an ability, so extra ability 12, which happens to be left shift. It's going to add an animation called unarmed roll. So if we walk over, pick those up, then we can, of course, I'm pressing shift now, nothing's happening. I pick it up, I push shift, I can roll. Then we'll just go quickly through these last two scripts, and I encourage you guys to download this map just so you can look through it, because, and then you can copy it as well for your intents and purposes. But let's look through this quickly. So the left cube we're starting with, which is the cube that doesn't rotate originally until you walk up to it, then it rotates. So this time, I just use trigger equals script parent. If you haven't seen any of our other videos, I encourage you to check them out, and that's just how it's referencing it within the hierarchy. So if the trigger equals the script parent, so the script is here, the parent is here, which is the trigger, and that's going to reference, now it's going to reference this. So every time this is called, it's going to be referencing this object. Then you got cube left equals custom property cube left, and how I did that, of course, was by clicking and dragging. So if I clicked and dragged this into here, then it's going to add that. Of course, I already have it, so it's adding it as a _0. I'll remove that, yes. Then we have our other functions, which are on begin overlap and on end overlap. So how you call those is down here, trigger dot end overlap event connect. So this trigger comes from up here, trigger. End overlap event connect is the core API, which we got out of our script generator tool. So of course that was here, and then you go from ability down to trigger overlap, and that's all written here. And then in brackets here, on begin overlap, that is calling this function right here. So I could change this to spin cube, and then I can go begin overlap. Instead of on begin overlap event, now it's going to be spin cube. So this is just referencing this function name right here, and what this function is referencing is a trigger and an other. So if other is a player, which of course we got from our script generator, then the cube left, which is referencing this cube right here in my hierarchy, rotation continuous, set to a new rotation. This is x-axis, z-axis, or x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis, sorry. And this is the speed at which it's going to rotate. So right now it's rotating at 100. If I add an extra 0, and I save that script, Control S, close it, now I press play. When I walk up to this, now this cube's going to be spinning quite a bit faster than it was before. So now you can see it's spinning really fast, and it stops. Go back into our script, so I can change that back to 100 and save that. Then we have when I leave the zone, which is end overlap event connect, and we can call this stop cube if we wanted to, but then of course we have to call it stop cube up here. Then trigger other, if other is a player, which of course we got from before, then I'm referencing my cube, I'm changing the rotation continuous to a new rotation, and that's 0, 0, 0. So now it's going to rotate at a speed of 0, 0, 0, which means it's not rotating. Then I just wanted to add a interaction so that you can see the interaction again and the other things that you can do with it. So the trigger or other, if other is a player, then the left position, which is getting the position of the left cube. So cube left is this here, and get position comes from the core API to get the position. And we're going to have videos, of course, on getting world position, rotations, and moving objects as well. So I take the z-axis of left position, and I make it equal to the left position plus 10, which means it's going to move it upwards, or it's going to change the left position dot z upwards. And then how I actually move it is I select my object, and then I move it to, which is core API, vector 3.new. You always have to use that. And then I put my new position. So this could also be written as 0, 0, 100. And then it'll move it to that position on the map, which would be up here. So it'd move it to somewhere completely different. However, I want to move it to a new position based off of where it is right now, and that's the amount of time it will take. So I could also change this to 100. Now if I save it and I go back, now when I go and I push F, now it moves it up 100 instead of 10, and it moves it over a 1-second period of time. Now of course I'm outside of the trigger zone, so the box isn't rotating anymore. So I hope you found this video informative. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're going to have a lot more videos coming out showing you how to use all sorts of different things, equipment, weapons, sound effects, you name it. So this is Steve from Gamer Titan signing off. See you later, Titans.